Yo, what's up, everybody? Today we're bringing you a special interview. I've got my good friend Dustin here with us, Dustin Coury. He's been a friend of mine now for about 2 years, and about 2 years, right? Yeah, and I'm excited to bring him on the podcast today. He's does commercial real estate out of Los Angeles, and of course, you guys all know Matt Nelson. So. Let's get right into it. Dustin, tell us a little bit about how you got started in real estate, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So I was selling commodities for about 10 years, rice and beans. And the market started
How
taking...
most people start in rice and beans. Okay.
Exactly. So I was doing truckload quantities. We're buying direct from the farmer. It was a real nickel and dime business where you're really trying to maximize every truckload that you get. Very finite margins.
Mm-hmm.
So, gets you really good at numbers. Anyway, so market started taking a turn. It was the Vancouver Olympics. And I remember we had most of the business of bulk rice in Whole Foods.
Okay.
And there's a company called Lumberg. It's a Lumberg family. You might have seen their rice on the shelves. They wanted to get into our business. They were doing more of packaging. They were doing bulk as well. But they took the new head of purchasing from Whole Foods up to the Vancouver Olympics for one weekend. And I got a call, I remember, on a Friday and said, "Hey, Dustin, you might not have business on Monday."
Oh, man.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So you went from selling rice and beans to selling nothing.
Basically overnight.
Wow.
And then we had other avenues of revenue, but that really just hurt us. And it kind of destroyed me mentally. And I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I was dating a girl for about 5 years. Her father did commercial real estate. He was one of the top players in Los Angeles, and he said, "You'd be great at real estate." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I knew nothing about real estate. I liked architecture, I liked building." And he said, "Check it out." So I did, and I really enjoyed it.
How many years ago was this?
Probably 8, 9 years ago.
So you just barely, meaning you got into real estate, so less than a decade ago.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you got beat up in rice and beans. Now we're thinking commercial.
Wasn't even thinking commercial. He told me to go into residential.
Okay.
And the reason is because residential deals are a lot quicker.
Yeah.
They're easier to manage. And there's a lot less understanding of being able to quantify the mechanics of what it takes to do a deal.
So the learning curve to get into residential, would you say, is less?
Oh my God, significantly less.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's something that most people can walk into.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the fortitude and the right attitude, you can do it.
So would you recommend someone who wants to get into commercial, that's their ultimate goal, to start in residential or to go right into learning commercial?
I did it a really weird way. I think you can go straight into commercial.
Okay.
You should have to have a really good mentor, and you need the financial background.
Okay.
Okay.
Something, because it's going to take a while, something to get you through until you're getting your couple of deals.
We have to understand how to deal with numbers and percentages on a large scale.
Yeah.
And then you also have to understand businesses, because commercial is business.
Yeah.
Right? And I've mentored quite a few kids out of college, and the hard part about getting them to understand commercial is that they don't understand business.
Okay.
Mm.
And when you're working in commercial, say one of my clients is Pernod Ricard, which I was telling you is a client of mine. I have to understand what they're going through mentally on why they're trying to pick a warehouse or a distillery.
Okay.
Right.
It's not just this is a property with 4 walls and a bathroom. I have to get into their heads.
Mental space.
Because you become an executive at that point in a commercial.
Mm.
You're not just a hired hand that comes in that's an accountant. Mm-hmm. You're an executive. And they expect you to. You're making executive money.
Mm.
Yeah.
And they want your expertise.
So they expect you to know their business, what they're looking for, what their business needs, so that you're finding them exactly what they need, not just a house here, a house there.
Exactly. It's not about a bathroom. It's not about the tile. It's not about is this plumbing good? Is it copper? Is it PEX? Is it, you know?
They don't care about that
It's a lot
stuff.
less emotional than residential.
For the most part, exactly. Yeah. It's more, is this our use? Does it fit in our 5-year plan, our 10-year plan?
Right.
What's the terms? What is it going to look like with the city? What's our holding costs? All sorts of different stuff of getting permits. There's just so many different variables, and it's all different types of businesses of what that looks like.
That's quite a bit more than residential. It's a lot more than that.
So let's go back a little bit to your story. But you did it a weird way, which I love, because it seems like everybody who's you hear, they're doing successful here or there, almost every single person's going to say, I did it in a weird way, right?
For sure.
And so there's not necessarily one path always. It's kind of where your life has put you and kind of where you want to go from there.
Yeah.
So you got started in residential.
I did.
So tell us a little bit how that evolved into where you are today.
So I got lucky. I started at I found my agency through a friend of mine in Los Angeles. She was an agent over at Dilbeck, which was over in the Valley, and I was over in Beverly Hills. She recommended me to a high school friend of hers that ran a place called Norman & Associates. In Los Angeles, a boutique agency is under 200 agents or so. We're 150 agents, 3 offices. So I went there. It was a very family vibe. Everybody cared for each other. Nobody's fighting for deals, which happens in big agencies a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
As you know, it's a dog-eat-dog world where people are always looking for these commissions. Rightfully so. That's how you make a living. Anyway, this wasn't that agency. So I went in and I had this game plan of my business plan of how I was going to do this. 2 weeks go by. Nothing's really clicking, and this woman just happens to walk by. I didn't know who she was. She says, "You're the new guy." She said, "Yeah, come with me." So I go to one of her multi-million-dollar listings.
Nice.
Basically, she said, "Shut up." I said, "Okay." That was basically the first 6 months was me just shutting up. And I didn't say anything in front of the clients. She told me what to do. I did it. And then she started giving me a little more leeway. 1.5 years later, we did probably 12 deals from 3.5 million to 6 million each deal.
Wow.
We're good sized deals. And I learned a lot. It was pretty amazing. I got very lucky. I was the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
But I was there to work. We were working probably 80 to 100 hours a week. I was always on call. There was nothing that I could say no to.
Yeah.
So she's basically showing you how to do this entire new world of big residential, and you're just soaking it up, learning everything you can from her.
Exactly, without even questioning what she said. Okay. I think that's the key, is that
washing her car, cleaning her house.
She could afford other people to do that. That wasn't the best use of my time. But for the most part, it was opening up houses, making sure that contractors were there, getting bids on stuff, making sure that inspections were done on time, properly, then going through the reports and making my own notes on top of the inspection notes, confirming different locations, houses, walking distances, all these little minute things that take time.
Yeah.
That for the most part, somebody of her caliber is not going to do.
Yeah.
She's got to spend the best amount of time on the things that she's good at.
And that's relationships.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's what you're doing. You're in her, you're hiring somebody that you trust.
Yeah. So when we, like a house, highest and best use, right? And the highest and best use of your time also is super important when it comes to real estate, but as I'm sure with most other businesses as well.
Absolutely.
So now you're apprenticing with this agent for a while, and Where does the shift come between residential and now you're like, wait a second, what's this situation happening here with commercial?
I went on my own. I had a good month. I thought I was on top of the world, and then it just dropped.
So you told her goodbye. You said, thanks for the mentorship.
Learned everything I need to know. Right. I don't need her anymore.
But you know,
the most egotistical thing you could imagine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I've got this.
Yeah. But you know, I think there's a lesson to be learned there too. I mean, at some point you have to test your own powers, right? You have to kind of step away and see if anything you've learned can actually sustain you on your own. And so I think that's a pretty natural step eventually, right? And some people just make it earlier or later than others, but eventually it was going to happen.
It's inevitable, and you have to do it.
Yeah, and we teach our listeners all the time, one of the best ways to get started is that mentor. We don't recommend people to just go off and do these multi-million-dollar deals and try to figure it out on their own, but then it's the mentorship. We preach that so much. That's so important.
Yeah, you can't.
You're not doing yourself a service, and you're not doing your client a service at all.
Right.
I tell these people all the time that come in and are like, hey, I'm just starting a commercial. There's this deal. Do you want to help me out? And I'm going to do most of it, but you'll just be there. And I said, no, I'm not here to ruin my relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm not here to watch you ruin your relationships either.
Yep.
If you want to do this right, get a good mentor, let them do it, take a small percentage, and really soak it up.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the key. We actually have a lot of people that, I've done flips with a lot of beginners, and they're never asking questions. They're never going to the house, asking questions to the contractors, learning the steps. They're just in it for the paycheck. And then they're 12 flips in and they're still needing partnerships, and they still don't know what they're doing. And it just amazes me.
Yeah, because if they would have taken that first step and maybe not make as much, or even just put a lot of time into it, then they would have, in the long run, they would have been out of that situation a lot quicker, and they would probably be making a lot more money now than still needing that mentorship 12, 13, or 20 deals later.
Absolutely. You have to have a foundation.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going to flounder.
Yeah.
And I think, again, this is the key to all of it, is that your client service. The paychecks will come, the referrals will come, if you do your job correctly, and you do it thoroughly and with a vigor more than anybody else.
I think that's sage advice. And so now tell us, you went on your own. So you had a really good month.
I did.
You did like what you were saying earlier. You did like 4 deals in 1 month, right?
I did. Yeah. It was the first time in the 40 years at that time. It was like 38 years of history of Norman & Associates, my agency. And I was able to, we went into escrow on a new house. This was one client. We went into escrow on one house based on her other house selling. We didn't even have the other house on the market yet.
Oh, wow.
So we told the seller, we said, we promise we'll sell this house within 30 days. And for some reason they believed us. I have no idea what I did or what I said. I spent the next week with gardeners, contractors, getting the house prepped.
Yeah.
I sold it within 12 hours with 8 offers.
So cash, then somebody came in cash and
$125,000 over asking.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, in 12 hours.
That is a good gardener. No, just kidding. That's awesome.
And so you felt pretty good about yourself at this point, right?
Right. So then, there was another deal. We did my buyer bought the highest price per square foot house in Venice at the time. But then 3 years later, it was worth 125% of what he bought it for.
Wow.
Wow.
So it looked like it was overpriced at the time.
Yeah.
But we knew that it was worth every penny, and it was worth more.
Interesting.
We were written up in LA Times and everything. It was a really cool scenario.
Yeah.
So what I'm seeing here is that your ego, you just keep on feeling really good about like these four deals, because I know what's gonna come next. So
I was on top of the world. I was like, I remember, God, I was so young and so egotistical. I went out on a date with the girl, and she's like, what do you do? I was like, I'm a real estate broker. And she's like, oh, cool. Have you done anything lately? I was like, yeah, I just sold 4 houses. I made $100,000. And I was the biggest douche ever. And it was karma, because the next 6 months, I didn't sell a fucking thing.
Oh no.
Was there a second date? That's what people really want to know.
I don't remember. But yeah, karma hit, and I just sat around trying to make deals happen. But it actually worked out for the best, because what I did was I didn't stay idle. I didn't keep on chasing that. I started figuring out what can I do to in this field. And what it was when my friends were starting companies, they owned companies or they worked for companies that needed offices or warehouse.
Okay.
So I started learning about it. I read books and just immersed myself into commercial.
So this was kind of like you're pulling yourself up from your own bootstraps. Like, you didn't really have a mentor as far as commercial was concerned. You just saw that there was a need and you wanted to kind of fit that.
Exactly. So I had to innovate.
Because you were saying you had no one at your brokerage doing commercial.
Right. There was not one person. So all of our leads, we have 150 agents, and all of our leads were going out to the big guys outside of the company. What I did have more than most people, even the other brokers in Los Angeles, is I owned a business for 10 years. And that was key. I ran warehouses. I knew logistics. I knew what it took and what somebody that owned a business needed and what they thought about.
Yeah.
What their 5-year projections are, what their 10-year projections are, what it looked like to be cash heavy or cash light, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, as a business owner, I could be in those
So you can relate to them, and that's going to help you get an edge on those leads and be able to come across as someone as a professional.
more than anybody else.
Yeah.
So at that point, now I had the skills of real estate, which is how to navigate clients. I knew how to go through escrow. I knew inspections. I knew contracts. But on top of that, I owned a business, which was more than anybody else. And that's what I gave to my clients, is I actually thought of it from their point of view.
Okay. So, and you were talking about that earlier, about how important it is in a commercial realm to be in your client's mind space, to kind of see what they're looking for, and them knowing that you're a professional. That you're not an accountant. You're not just looking at numbers and giving them a sheet, but you're actually in the process with them, and they can rely on you and trust you to help them make the smartest decision.
You become a business advisor more than anything. And you look at a property and say, how does this benefit your company?
Yeah.
That's what you do.
So what you're saying is it's very different from residential as far as what the client's needs are and how to fulfill those needs.
Correct.
Okay.
So you start the first commercial department in the brokerage. Is that what you do, or?
I spent the first few years navigating my own stuff, making sure that I could service the brokerage, and I wanted to make sure that I could handle the volume of 150 agents coming in, and I wasn't going to burn bridges. Because that's the last thing I wanted to do, was get into a situation where I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay.
Ruin those relationships that you built up for so many years.
Absolutely. And so I wanted to make sure that ownership trusted me. I wanted to make sure that brokers trusted me. And more than anything, I wanted other brokers to trust me too, because in the commercial world, you really have to trust on each other.
Yeah.
And you have to know that this guy is worthy to work with, because otherwise you don't want to go through 6 months of hell.
Yeah.
And these deals are long.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you're relying on another broker a lot of the time to make a deal go through. Because if they're not doing their job, everything falls apart.
So there's a lot of trust. So the more you're building trust with other brokerages, other agents, so that when deals come onto your plate, you know, hey, I'm dealing with this broker or this agent, then you have a higher degree of confidence that the deal's going to go through.
Exactly.
As opposed to a newbie agent who comes on the table and maybe they don't understand the trust game quite yet, and they're thinking just highest dollar. And so you know that you could be abandoned at the last second, and you know all that work that you put into something could be flushed down the toilet. So that trust game, when you get into the higher, let's say, echelons of commercial real estate, that trust game really becomes important.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example of something. There was a property that a client of mine, we went into escrow. He was the buyer. He wanted to do a creative use out of it. But what it was a food manufacturing plant before that. And in Los Angeles, buildings go through different decades of different uses. So you have to do multiple different inspections. And do you guys have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 out here of inspections?
No.
Not in residential.
Not residential. Okay.
Yeah.
So for commercial, what they are is they're hazardous substances. And what you do is phase 1 is you do a paper view of what that property was. And usually through records, this building was built in 1910. You'll go through all the records and it'll say it was a bakery, it was a noodle shop, and then maybe at some point it was an elevator service shop. That triggers something. So you go from phase 1, and if it was always a bakery, then you would just go, okay, phase 1 done, check. We move on to the next inspection. At phase 2, if I saw that it was a elevator service company, I'd say what kind of chemicals and material were they using there? Well, what is usually elevators are made out of? It's steel, electronics, and hydraulics.
Yeah.
So you have hydraulic fluid.
And then that's the red flag.
And then where do you keep hydraulic fluid? In gigantic tanks. So we started thinking, we're like, this is interesting. This is going to take some more due diligence. So what we did is we had to do sonar on the ground.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's something I wouldn't think of.
Exactly.
Crazy.
So these are the things that you learn.
Yeah.
After doing sonar, we found one tank. It was 20 feet down. We had to drill multiple holes all over an 1.5 acre property until we hit it.
Wow.
We found it. Luckily, it didn't have anything. We excavated it up. $60,000.
Man.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we do a meth test for $90. I'm guessing this is probably worth. It costs a little bit more than
we do a drain scope for $250. That's pretty crazy. So
who's paying the bill on this?
That's a negotiation. So then we found another tank on this property. And that took so this was a deal. After you find it, you have to excavate it. You also have to start looking around the perimeter at where it may be seeped through. When you pull the tank, there's a chance that if it's been there for 50 years, it leaked through.
Yeah.
And if that happens, then you have to do a phase 2 on the properties around there. Because if it leaks into the property next to it, then you're liable for it.
Right.
So
As
when you
the owner,
purchase it, you taking over that liability.
you're taking it over, exactly.
Yeah.
Not the previous.
Interesting.
You are.
So is this all being done while you're under contract, or is this before a sale or after a sale?
If you have somebody that's good, it's during. And while you're doing it, you're able to negotiate what that looks like. If you're splitting the cost, if they're paying for it, and if they were defiant on it, if they're saying that they didn't know something was there, but you have reasonable suspicion that they knew it was there, then you go back and say, hey, you guys pay for this. This was negligence on your part. You didn't take care of this when you bought it 20 years ago. There's different ways of doing this.
So you can even go backtrack after you've purchased it. But typically this phase 1, phase 2 is happening while you're still in negotiation, right?
Exactly. So phase 1, preliminary. Phase 2 is actual finding it. Phase 3 is removing it.
Okay.
So now we go into phase 3, removal. And who pays for the removal?
Right.
That's the question.
Yeah.
We usually pay for the inspection. So phase 1,
The buyer
phase 2.
does.
Buyer, exactly. That's roughly around $4,500 to $6,000. Removal is the expensive part.
Yeah.
And nobody knows what that looks like, because when you have to remediate around the surrounding areas, that could be endless. You could be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Especially in LA. I mean, you might be next to, the Beverly Hills Hotel. You might be next to like a multi-million dollar company that doesn't want anything being drilled into their basement.
I mean, this was a small warehouse that was 3,000 square feet, and it was still, at that time, this was 7 years ago, it was 1.6 million. It's worth probably around 4 million now.
Wow.
For just a small warehouse that was nothing in it.
Wow.
And the next door neighbor, they had a 12,000 square foot tilt-up building, which is just a concrete slab all around 4 walls. Imagine remediating that. You'd have to take it down all the way You'd have to dig underneath, and who knows how far that would go.
Yeah.
And now you're talking, you're having to take that down. That could be a $2 million job.
Yeah.
It's
That
just,
totally could kill the deal right
it's
there.
crazy.
Yeah. That's insane.
Wow.
So people want to know the numbers because a lot of us, we get into commercial, residential for different reasons, but a lot of people want to know, how much am I going to make? What do the numbers look like compared to residential, the amount you're getting paid for on this buying and selling leases compared to commercial?
In Los Angeles specifically?
Sure.
Yeah.
That's probably more your,
Yeah.
you probably know those numbers better.
I'm sure it's
Yeah.
pretty similar to here. If it's more in commercial there, it's probably more in commercial here in Utah or any other state.
Right. So as a day-to-day player that's doing warehouses, office space, for the most part, residential and we're talking somebody that's top of their game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Top of their game, they're probably making similar money because in Los Angeles, you have $2 to $10 million homes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Those go pretty quick. It's a quick turnaround. You
It's
guys are
amazing.
doing-
It's amazing to hear that 10 million goes pretty quick. That's that's awesome.
So the deals just they go quicker in residential. You guys are residential. You guys
Yeah.
are able to close in 30 to 60 days.
Right.
Our stuff is upwards of 6 months
Okay.
of a
Quite
deal
a bit
time.
longer.
Yeah, and the loss on that is a lot more. When I say loss of losing a deal,
So your opportunity cost, basically.
the cost of spending time on
So
something.
you could be
Yeah.
Working on that 5 months or even almost 6 months, then it falls apart the day before closing.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
the sellers, just if you're selling, the sellers now lost 5 months where they could have been in contract with another buyer, right? So they've
course.
lost half a year.
Exactly. And so it kind of evens out, even though that office building might be 60 million, maybe 80 million. In that amount of time of doing that deal, you guys could already have 6 deals
Yeah.
done, 7 deals done. So your gross sales is pretty much the same for the most part, residential to commercial.
Because you may have the bigger chunk, but it takes longer. We might do 5 or 6 deals shorter, but we're making our money back pretty quick.
Exactly. Usually we have a higher percentage, especially on leases. A lot of our deals are done on leases, so 5-year term, 10-year terms make up a bulk. So you could easily have an office deal that is a $5 million lease over time.
Wow.
So it's stuff like that.
So are you seeing more?
That's a 4% commission on that.
Oh, so you're making 4%
Correct. From
on an $80 million.
From the leasee side.
From the lease
leaseor is
side.
at 2%. Roughly, if you take it as a whole, it's a 6% across the board
Okay.
for sales and leasing.
Okay.
Wow.
Until you get into over the 50 million mark, then it goes down to about 2%
Right.
each side. So
Wow.
4% total.
So are you seeing more leases or more full-on sales in LA right now?
Leases take up a bulk. I think office space is the biggest thing right now in Los Angeles. Office space, especially right now during COVID, if we're speaking specifically of this time right now, it's because the union, writers union, which is a lot of Los Angeles office space in the Hollywood area, every writer has to have their own room.
Because of the union. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I have a couple of A-list writers right now that are like, I have to quadruple my space right now, Dustin. Can we buy 3 more levels right now?
Wow.
And I'm like, sure.
Yeah, let's do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that is such an interesting question. So obviously that's one benefit of kind of the COVID situation, but are you seeing it?
It's a benefit now. For the last 2 months, though, before that, they had no clue. And who knows how that's going to work out because they have no idea of when they're going to go back to work. They're writing, but actual production, because that's the end goal, right? Is
Yeah.
to be production.
Yeah.
They have no clue of how they're going to get
Could be
actors
a
on
year
set.
before production starts.
Oh,
It
yeah.
could be even longer. That's crazy.
It's wild.
So why would you say commercial, because you've done both now, what would you say would be your favorite, commercial or residential, and why?
I like commercial because you get your weekends off. Commercial guys?
Because they're not working in the weekends, is that why?
Oh no, you can't get a hold of a commercial guy.
Interesting.
After 6 o'clock at night, it goes to voicemail.
Nice.
A lot of them even 5 o'clock. On the weekends, that's family time.
Yeah.
There is no work.
Okay.
5 o'clock on Friday, good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because if you're in the commercial world and everybody, even when they're looking at the house, they're just thinking numbers, right? It's not a passion buy. It's not like, hey, we need to hurry and find a house by next week.
Right.
It's, we'll find the right property that makes sense for the numbers when we find it.
Well, in residential, they're working during the week. Their only time to look and do everything is on the weekend.
Yeah, a lot of times. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're dealing with businesses. That's why.
Yeah.
The CEO of Microsoft isn't going to be working on the weekend.
No.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So you're thinking overall, from a commercial, I mean, obviously you've got different people in different categories of expertise, but the top real estate, or let's say this top residential guys and the top commercial guys, are they, taking home about the same? It's just a different job that they're doing, or commercial guys just blowing the residential guys out of the water?
Totally different piece. In Los Angeles, there's some residential guys that are just, it's mayhem how much they're doing.
Right.
They're doing $600 million in sales a year.
Wow, so 3% on 600 million.
2%, usually.
2%, okay.
But these guys are making 10, 15.
I'd take 1% of that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're making, after everything, they're walking away with $10, $15 million.
Yeah.
After paying their office and everything else.
Wow.
It's wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a couple, I don't know if I should say names, but they started at my company and they went off to another company. And they just skyrocketed out of nowhere. They went from doing $2 million homes into doing $30 million homes overnight.
It's a big difference. Wow.
So there's not really, it's really about finding your expertise rather than necessarily one's going to be giving you a bigger paycheck at the end of the day. It's because the expertise is going to bring that passion, and that passion is going to bring the money.
Absolutely. I think you do what you know.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think you should force yourself into what makes more money. I think you should go into, like you said, what drives you, what are you passionate about?
Right.
So what would be your advice? Someone looking, they're just starting off, they're looking to get into either residential, commercial, leases, buying, selling. What would your overall tips be for them?
Who's your client? Who do you want to interact with daily? That's important. Do you want to deal with the soccer mom? And that might be the person that you want to deal with because you're taking your kids to preschool and to middle school games and stuff. That's who you're networking with.
Yeah.
Or is it John that just started a bike company and he just hired 15 people to start making bicycles? Does he need a warehouse? Does he need a lot for storage? What are the people that you want to deal with?
Yeah.
Also, what kind of life do you want? Do you want to work on the weekends? Are you just starting a family? Do you want to be able to see your kids on the weekend? Do you guys want to go to Europe and do these things? Just envision what the next 5-10 years looks like and be really honest with yourself. Don't try to chase that dollar tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because that's what's important. Longevity. You're not going to make much money the first couple of years. It's very difficult to. Some people get very lucky. I got very lucky. Started to make money right off the bat. But I see people that haven't made $1 in the first year.
Right.
So play the long game. And 5 years, you will make money. 10 years, you will have a career.
Right.
You'll have a lifetime career.
Yeah.
But what does that look like?
Sure.
There's a lot of commercial guys that hate their lives.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Hate it. I can't tell you how many guys that are, when I first started out, I'd say, give me the tips. What should I expect? I said, get out while you can.
Just because the hours are so grueling and the clientele they have to deal with, or what?
There's a lot of egos. There's a lot of people that just have to win, especially when you're dealing with multi-million-dollar properties. You have to be okay with losing deals. Not losing the game, so-called, but deals, because stuff just falls out for no reason.
So kind of rejection, to be able to overcome that all the time, constantly.
Yeah, stuff that you cannot do.
Right.
I lost 2 deals in a weekend that were total $10 million between both of them. And one of them was his wife told him not to do it. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Does your wife run your business? Does she know anything about it? No, but she just doesn't want me to do it. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. There's nothing I can do.
She's not your favorite person in the whole world.
You know, I don't blame them. That's their relationship, and that's how they do things, and that's how they've managed it, and they're happy with it. It just sucks after putting months. I mean, we worked months on this deal.
Yeah.
The other one that fell through was, I guess I can say this stuff because I'm not saying names. He had a mental breakdown. And basically said, Dustin, I can't handle this. It's really freaking me out. This was after months of working on this deal. So I said, we can't close this deal. This is too good of a deal to close. You are going to regret this for the next 10 years. Back and forth for the next couple of hours. This was a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. On both deals, I swear to God, both of them called me within the hour.
Oh my gosh.
And after telling my client, I was like, you have to make this happen. So he said, talk to my money manager. Or it got to the point where, I remember what it was, how I got to the money manager. I said, all right, I've been working on this deal for too long. I have to get paid somehow, some amount. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, we were about to close this deal. By the way, both of these deals were going to close in 2 weeks. And I said, I have to get paid somehow. And he said, talk to my money manager. I understand. I appreciate you and your work, what you did. Got on the phone with the money manager. I said, you guys have to make this deal. You have to. Figure it out. And he said, I'll call you back in 2 hours. Called me back. They brought in the sister, who also had money.
Okay.
And we were able to close.
Wow.
Nice.
So we pulled one of the two out.
And that's...
But that stuff happens all the time, and you have to be okay with it.
And I think I remember talking to you when you were going through this time and saying that, and it kind of reminded me of my real estate agent days in residential, but, not every agent would have been able to pull that out and make that work, right? It takes a special kind of personality, a special kind of person to be able to, pull the right levers and pulleys and push the right places here and there to make things fall into place. It's not, you don't just sit back and hope things are going to happen.
I agree with you. I think that the only reason I've ever had success in my life was because I kept on pushing towards my goal. I never let somebody say no. I knew when to back down for my own time management.
Right.
Or when I knew that it just wasn't going to work. But if I knew something was right and I thought to myself, this makes sense, I've always pushed through until I got what I needed.
That's
Awesome.
Or what my client needed, or whatever that scenario needed. I made sure that it happened. Whereas other people might usually just say, this is too much work. Or they might not be vocal about their needs. That's a huge thing. You have to be vocal and communicate your needs. You're not going to get it all the time, but to communicate it is very important.
Yeah. Sounds like good advice for a relationship, too.
Sounds like we're in a therapy session right now.
But that's what we are. We're in relationship business.
Yeah,
True.
absolutely.
That's all we
Very
are.
true.
We don't have a magic ball, do we?
Nope.
Do you guys know what's going to happen on your deals at the end of them?
I wish.
Nobody does.
Yeah. Did anybody know COVID was going to hit?
No.
I mean, it's just nobody knows.
But if you have a relationship with yourself and your partners, clients, buyers, sellers, everybody in the deal, then you create a trust. And no matter what happens, you know that we're there together.
Yeah.
That you had each other in mind.
I like that.
I really like that we keep coming back to this word trust because, there's the more I'm in the business, the more I realize how important trust is, and not necessarily just, trust as itself, but trust is actually the thing that creates the value, right? Like money itself, what money is just trust, really.
100%.
If the reason the American dollar is where it is compared to other currencies is because the trust that people have in the American economy. The moment the American economy doesn't have that level of trust, guess what happens to the dollar, right?
It devalues.
And that trust is just so paramount in anything that we value, right?
Yeah.
The reason that you can value something is you have some sort of trust in its longevity, right? The reason you value a relationship, the reason you value a house, the reason you value an experience is because of what you can trust that it brings to you in your life.
Absolutely. Down to what you're even talking about. I look at Carl Malone, what he's done with all of his businesses around Utah, right? All of his motorsports, his car dealerships, auto body. The reason why it works is because you know that face. You have this trust on some ambiguous idea of what he is. You have no idea really who he is.
Yeah.
But that name.
You're going to trust that he can deliver.
Yes.
Exactly. Absolutely. No, I mean, he's brilliant to do that here, obviously, in Utah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily require a genius to know that Malone would do really well here in Utah.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's because of that trust, because he brought us to the championships, and
right,
so
but it translates into other places.
Exactly.
Too.
Isn't that interesting how trust can translate in other areas? It's how I like the quote, "How you do one thing is how you do everything," right? Because there's so much
so good.
Yeah, it's great because so much translates into other parts of our lives, right? You may think you're only doing this here, but in reality, you're creating a personality that does that everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people might be wanting to know why we're having this amazing view in the middle of nowhere and why we're sitting on a crate right now. So why don't we go into, where are we right now?
We're on my 22 acres.
22 acres. What city?
Park City.
Park City.
Yeah.
And this is, guys, this is gorgeous out here. We might span around and show you guys, but 22 acres in the heart of Park City is gorgeous. We got lakes, we got amazing views. It's gorgeous out here.
Yeah.
And so you're building your own house out here.
Yeah, with my own two hands.
With your own two hands.
During
that's that's
we need
one
to
to
show that off too.
Oh, we
That
will.
is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I started off as a real estate agent. Now I'm doing mostly investing. But one thing that I've loved about real estate throughout my entire career is the freedom and flexibility it's given me. And I just think it's great that you can do real estate in LA and still be able to come out here, have a second home, and have the time to create it, to put your own sweat and tears into it. And not every job can allow that kind of freedom or flexibility to be able to do that.
Real estate is a blessing in that way. I think it's how much you put into it is how much you're going to get back. And I see that too. If I come out here for a couple of weeks, which I've done, I do notice that I don't get as much done. But I can.
Right.
I can, because there's that flexibility.
Yeah.
But I notice that I do lose productivity of not being there.
Right.
But the flexibility is there.
Yeah. And that's also comes back to lifestyle, right? Like that ultimately, I don't think anybody's getting into real estate so they can spend their entire life crunching numbers and fighting with other brokers. Like nobody has that as the ultimate vision. It's what the real estate can bring to your life, right? What you can do with the time and the freedom and the money that real estate can bring to it in those times like right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. I think one of the hardest things that it took me a long time to figure out is being able to have that freedom to let go. Because when I first started out for the first 5 years, I was there for every phone call. I responded to every email within seconds. I dropped everything to be somewhere. I would be out here and somebody said, "Oh, I want to see something." I'd fly back right away. And it took a while for me to be like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be done right now. It's not feast or famine. Things will go. Once you start laying down the foundation, deals will always be there. They're always going to come in. and people can wait 2 hours. They can wait 3 hours for
Yeah.
my email. I can call them back
Yeah.
because that's normal.
And what I love about real estate is you could also set it up as a business. You can delegate, you can hire people.
Right.
It's not, you have to be in charge of everything, because in the beginning, I also did everything too. Every flip, I was there for everything and had to took care of everything. Now I don't deal with utilities. I don't deal with that stuff. I delegate that to other people.
Right, but it's scary when you're first starting.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
You-
Yeah.
You feel like you have to micromanage
And you feel like
everything.
you're the best at everything, and only you can do it that way. And you
It's the very
realize,
opposite of
yeah,
everything.
yeah, exactly.
At least for me, there's a lot better people at certain stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's very true.
So I want you to walk us through one horror story that you've had in commercial real estate, but also want you to walk us
Just
through
one?
Yeah, maybe yeah, just one, to kind of give us an idea of, okay, this is what can go wrong. But I also want you to share with us one of your biggest success, like one of the things that just went right, because just kind of give people at home a perspective on, hey, this is where the lows are, but this is also where the highs are.
Yeah. Let's see. The lows can be worked on a property. It's a 2.5 acre property in Los Angeles. Worked on it for 2.5 years. First, I started leasing out the properties
yeah,
and creating that relationship with an older gentleman that owned it for a long time. Owner user for the most part. He owned, I'm not going to say the use, but it was a recreational use on part of it, and then there were nine retail spaces. So I started out leasing the 9 units on hoping to sell the whole property. After about 1.5 years of doing this, he gets sued for sexual harassment
Uh-oh.
by one of the recreational users there. One of the people that is an athlete
yeah.
on the property. And so basically my 1.5 years was a big waste.
So what happened when he gets sued then at that point? Does he not have protection in place, or?
He has protection, but at that point we can't sell it because there's too much of a liability of if he gets this cash, then now they can come after more
So
money.
he's not wanting. He's like,
So
I got to hold on to this
oh, I
for a
see.
long time.
So he doesn't want to sell now, so he's not liquid.
His lawyer would not allow it.
Oh,
Yeah.
man, that's a long time to be working in the hopes of something happening. I don't know too many people that can go 1.5 years and have that just totally squashed and be like, yep, let's go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
So tell us one of your success stories.
Success stories. I'll tell you the most recent one. There was a club that was operating in the heart of Hollywood for 15 years. I managed this building. It's 2 acres right in the middle of Hollywood.
Prime.
110,000 square feet of space. And this club, 15 years, it's been there. It is 20,000 square feet. He gave his notice within 2 months. I had it leased out to one of the largest club operators in Los Angeles, which is pretty much unheard of to happen that quick. Usually something will last 6 months to 1 year on the market. We're able to turn it, flip it, and lease it out for $90,000 a month. So we were about $1 over market.
Awesome. So on a deal like that, if you don't mind sharing, what's your take home on something like that?
Yeah, so I was 3%
$90,000 a month
for 10 years.
for 10 years. So, and the beauty about commercial is that you now have a monthly check coming in because you're the one who
No,
leased
I get
it.
paid right away. So
Right away. So they take the 10 years.
amortize it.
Wow.
So how that works is you get paid the first half for signing, and then there's a thing called rent abatement that usually happens that's negotiated. So that's free rent. And then after the rent abatement is over and they start paying the first month, that's when I get paid. The second half of my commission usually.
Awesome. So within,
Rent commencement is what we call it.
so from the time that deal landed in your lap to the time that you signed that lease, how much money do you think you made?
How much money did I make for that whole deal?
Yeah.
I mean, we can figure this out. That's 120 months at $90,000, but 3% increases every year. This is quick math. I'm going to guess that's around, what, $13 million? $13 million at 3%. So roughly, what, $300,000?
Great.
$350,000?
I'm more impressed that you did that math in your head. Like, that was what impressed me the most about that deal.
So the beauty is you can, that's great. It's bigger commission than I'd ever made on a flip, on a
You
residential
can't really
flip.
get that in residential. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah, it's neat, and so off of that property, that's 110,000 square foot rentable square footage property. That's only 20,000 square feet
Yeah.
of that one property in Hollywood.
That's crazy.
So there's a lot of money to be made in commercial.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Now, we've talked a little bit about where you've been. We've talked about a little bit about where you are now. You've had experience both in residential and commercial. Where do you see the next 10 years for you?
Here, probably what? You're talking about another 22 acres right over there?
Is real estate something you're gonna keep in your pocket, or do you have other ideas? Like, I'm just curious. Now you've kind of seen the world of real estate. Where's the next step?
So over the last 6 months, I've been transitioning into, rather than taking on a lot more clients, I've been narrowing my client list and being more of an asset manager, where I take big portfolios, $250 million, $500 million portfolios, and I manage their assets. And it becomes more of a customized life,
Right.
where they say, you know what, I want a 5% cap rate on my investments. I want those holdings to look like warehouse. I want to triple net deals. I know this sounds like foreign stuff.
Triple
in
net
residential.
lease, yeah.
So triple net lease is basically the tenant, the leasee, pays for all the overhead of the building. Landlord just collects a check.
It's amazing.
It really is. It's probably the best deal you could get. Or somebody else might want the office building, which is more of a full service lease, which means that the owner has a manager that takes care of security, cleaning, everything for the building. All the tenant does is pay their rent, and they come in and they don't have to do anything.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So there's different ways of playing this game, and it depends on what kind of operator you are. If you're a micromanager owner, you want that office lease because you can micromanage every nickel and dime, and you can really fine-tune your cap rate on that.
Interesting.
Because you can get cheaper security, you can get cheaper cleaning service, you can do this, and when you're working on volume, some of these guys own multiple office buildings so that they can fine-tune their investment. It's basically, you tell me what you need, and I'll manage your assets to what you want.
That's great.
And that's what I want to do. And that's basically what I've gotten to the point of, because I've been managing 150 agents over the past, 4 or 5 years. I've done enough deals. I did the second distillery with Pernod Ricard in Los Angeles, a city of 12 million people. Second distillery with a $30 billion company. I've done multiple office stuff with huge operators, sales of recreational places. We've done land, creative use. We've done pretty much all spectrums of whatever you want. Full service, triple net, gross leases. Now at this point in my life, I want to take all that experience, and what I am doing is now fine-tuning that for select clients that want me to look at.
So that's going to give you more flexibility, maybe less hours. Is that kind of what you're looking for here in the future?
I think it's more of being on call to less people, being more precise and fixating on what they need, rather than having to manage a bunch of stuff where things get lost in the crack. I want to be able to be very focused and attentive to what my clients need.
And you can build a little bit more of that personal relationship instead of, trying to readjust to a bunch of different needs that come in on top of you, where you have a select clientele that you kind of have an idea of what to expect already.
Yes and no. I think I've always was able to give my clients the specialized needs that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just now I can do it in a more precise way if I have a smaller client list.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So I have one more, I guess, story I'd like for you to share, which I just think is an awesome story, to kind of the potential of what's available in real estate. But tell us a story about, I think it was your boss who bought the property in Hollywood back in the 70s and what it's worth today.
Yeah. Yeah, so he was a real estate broker. He started out as an engineer building parking structures, and something led to him working out a deal on a 2-acre property over on Ventura Boulevard back in the 70s. The buyer needed part of the commission from the seller to buy the property, so he asked my boss to, when I say my boss, all my clients are my bosses.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Trust me, I'm not the boss. Let's
Yeah.
be clear on that. Never am I the boss.
Yeah.
So my client, he said, I'm not willing to give you my commission. So the guy said, well, I need this commission to buy this property. Would you want to become a partner? He said, fine, I'll become a partner in it with you. I guess about 15 years later, they decided to sell.
So how much was his commission?
His commission was $16,000.
$16,000
Did that
he
make
gave
him a
up.
50-50 owner in this property?
It did.
Oh, wow. Wow.
If we only had a
Ventura
time
Boulevard,
machine.
That's amazing.
Right, on Ventura Boulevard.
I'll buy it for $17,000.
So he gave up half his commission, $16,000 in the 70s. Flash forward.
They sold that property. He turned it and bought a 2-acre building in Hollywood.
A 2-acre, and this was in the 80s.
So he made a lot of commission on this and bought another building with that when he turned it around.
He didn't make any commission
Oh, okay.
on the first one. So he sold the other one, didn't make any commission, but he took that money that he made off of his half share of the
Yep.
property
Gotcha.
and then turned it into that building, and now that building's worth around $250 million.
So, $250 million. So he turned $16,000 into $250 million. That's got to be the best return I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it's next level.
Yeah. I don't know what percentage that is, but it is very high. It is very high.
So the possibilities are endless in real estate, really.
Absolutely. I think time is what you need in real estate.
Yeah.
Just recognizing where to be and what it's going to look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's great advice, actually. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, we talk about flipping houses, which is great because you can make massive income quickly. That's about looking at the short-term market, you know, where it's going to be in 6 months, right?
Especially if you're as good as you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe if you want, but that's short-term massive income, right? The real massive income is that long game where you're looking at where trends are happening, who's moving into what states, who's moving into what cities, how fast that income is, you know, that influx of people is happening, and then projecting that out 10 years and trying to be a little ahead of the curve.
It is. You're absolutely right. Now, here's another, I wouldn't say issue, but there's another thing to think about. When you start accumulating assets like that, when you go to sell something for $250 million. To buy another asset for $250 million, it's virtually impossible to be able to create the income of the percentage of what you bought it for. So he bought it in the 80s at low amount to what it is worth,
very low.
right?
Yeah.
So his return on investment from his rents right now are incredible.
Right.
So on paper, he's worth $250 million. But to go and sell that, he could never put it into another asset and make the
Same return. Yeah.
on investment.
So in one sense, what you're saying is it would be dumb for him to liquidate. It's better to keep that on his portfolio as I'm worth X amount of dollars, and to leverage that piece of paper that shows what he's worth to buy other investment properties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The only way that you become liquid on that is, I mean, you'd sell it and then you just put it in a bank and you'd be losing money.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting place to be at that point. It's
Right.
'cause-
You're basically retired at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're making a great income, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. But it is interesting because the name of the game in that respect is leverage, right?
Yeah.
It's leverage the assets that you have instead of liquidating the assets that you have.
Well, some would say what you guys do could be a smarter bet, or being an agent or a broker, because you're actually creating that income off of somebody else, and that becomes a liquid
Right.
income, right?
Yeah.
And then you're not holding assets.
Right.
Whereas he has something that is only liquid if he sells it.
Right.
True. Yeah.
It's just a different way of playing with money.
Yeah. And that's, the more I get into this, the more I realize how much of a game it really is, right? It's the
Right.
game of money. It's that trust aspect obviously holds the foundation. It holds everything together. But then once you've kind of figured out the rules, right? Now you can play around with those rules and leverage here, move pieces here, use other people's portfolios, credit, all that stuff, line of credits as opposed to loans, all those things come into play. And it's a game of moving pieces. And the more you understand that game, the more that you can leverage the assets that you do have, or liquidate the assets that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. What you guys do, again, I think is just really a great way of doing things, is that you're creating an income and you're holding on to that. And when you let go of the asset, now you have something tangible in your bank account.
Right.
That's special.
Yeah.
Versus if you hold on to something which is still special, that's generational wealth.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a difference between generational wealth or being able to retire at 50.
True.
Yeah.
The guy that's generational wealth, he's not retiring until he's 80. And I promise you that. I know multiple guys that are worth tens of millions of dollars in LA, but they're still working their butt off at 80 years old.
Wow.
It's because they're still relying on that income of the properties.
Interesting. Well, it sounds to me like we're going to need to have another interview with you on that whole topic right there. So,
Guys, how to retire by 50 next week. No.
yeah.
These guys.
Cool, man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having us. We love to check out all the acreage.
Thank you.
We'll showcase the cool house that you've been building, that he built all himself with his own hand, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And it's
I tell Matt and Dustin, I just hire my contractors. Dustin, he does it all himself. So there's some pride in this one.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing
Thank
build.
you. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's gorgeous out here. I'd love to have my own acreage out here. It's great.
Set you up a house right over there.
Perfect.
I've got enough
We're
room.
right next to you. That teepee. I'll just fly the teepee down.
We can string a string along with a tin can at the end, and we can talk to each other.
I love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Dustin.
Yes, thank
Thanks,
you so
guys.
much.
And we'll be back soon.
Thank you.
See ya.